2018 was a notable year in the Toastmasters International Speech Contest. The first reason was because that was the first year that I entered the contest. And that maiden year, I managed to get all the way to second place out of the whole of Scotland. And I was pretty chuffed with this maiden performance. Now later on in the year, once the World Championships had been completed and the World Championship had been crowned, I saw this winning speech by Ramona J. Smith. And as I watched this speech, I realized, oh, that's what it takes. That's the difference between finishing second in your country and finishing first out of the entire world. I now saw what I needed to do and how I needed to improve if I wanted to continue to perform better and improve in this contest and potentially get to that position myself in the future. Now, that's a minor remarkability about 2018. The main remarkability about 2018 was this was the first year that the top 3 places were all won by women. And not only were they all won by women, they were actually all women of color as well. And that was pretty remarkable in 2018. But it's actually happened 2 more times since. The 2 most recent years at the time of recording, 23 and 24, the top 3 places, again, have all been claimed by women. We're going to look at this first remarkable instance, and I'm going to look at the other speakers from this year, the 2nd and 3rd place finishers, a little bit further down the line. But I wanted to look at this one first because this is also a landmark speech when I'm looking at my relationship with the International Speech Contest and the World Championship of Public Speaking. This being the winner of the first year that I started competing, this has been the first benchmark that I've been looking at. So each year that I've entered, I've obviously gone and looked at the person who won that year and thinking, okay, if I had gotten all the way to that stage and I was up against this, what would it take for me to be better than that speech? What would it take for me to emulate this speech and be that winner, be that top 3 finisher, be at the World Championship of Public Speaking? That's what we're going to look at in this speech analysis today. I'm going to cover what are all the techniques and skills that Ramona J. Smith is displaying in her speech here. And then also thinking about, well, what would I do to make this speech better? Because if I can see something that makes this speech better, then that's something that I potentially transfer into my own speaking that would have made my speech and my speaking get further along in this contest. Now, a little bit of a legal disclaimer before we start. The footage that we're using today is provided by Toastmasters International. I do not claim ownership of this footage. The use of this footage is for informational and educational purposes only. And we've got a whole lot of learning to do today as we watch the World Champion of Public Speaking 2018, Ramona J. Smith.
Still standing, Ramona J. Smith.
I love how Ramona comes out with a laugh there. You can see that she's just ready to enjoy these next 7 minutes. She's ready to enjoy this opportunity. And a lot of things that I say to my clients, especially when we're doing group coaching together, is I always try to make the sessions we do as a group fun. I always try to install that fun and enthusiasm into speaking. Because if you're having fun, you're going to do it more. And I also believe that if you're having fun, you're going to perform at your best. And I think Ramona really embodies that, literally just coming out onto stage, laughing, smiling. Oh my God, I'm here. This is awesome. This is amazing. Let's get stuck into this speech. Love the energy and passion coming out of Ramona before she's even said a word of her speech.
Round 1, college.
There's so much to pick apart in what Ramona is doing here. The first is a fantastic example of stage movement, but not just stage movement for stage movement's sake. It's having a purpose behind why she's doing that movement. What she wants to do here is she wants to anchor stories that she's going to share. She's going to share 3 stories, She wants one story to be anchored here. So whenever she goes to this part of the stage, the audience know that they're in this story. She's going to share two more stories and anchor them to different parts of the stage. What we're also seeing tied up in here, beyond just the stage movement and the anchoring, is she's using this boxing metaphor. And we're going to pick out loads of different examples in this speech of how she runs this metaphor through. What she's doing here, as well as anchoring the stories, instead of it just being, here's my first story, here's my second story, here's my third story, she goes, round one. So this is a clever, creative way of essentially saying, I'm going to share different things with you and I'm going to number them so you can keep track. But instead of just, I'm going to number them so you can keep track, she's actually weaving that into this metaphor and theme of the speech. It's really clever, really dynamic. This is something that I always actually show as an example. When I'm working with clients, I'm talking about purposeful stage movement. This is the clip that I often come to because I think it's really a textbook example of how you create that anchoring and how you build this narrative arc through your stage position and stage movement.
I married my soulmate, the love of my life, my best friend. He was fine too.
We get a little joke there and a little laugh. Let's see what happens next.
We were married for 8 long, beautiful, amazing months. Yep.
What we see here is the layering of humor. And if you've watched some of my other analysis videos, you'll see that I talk about this layering of humor as well. Humor is about momentum. You don't just throw out a one-liner and that gets this rip-roaring massive laugh. Humor needs to be warmed up. Do you notice that I paused it when she did that little joke of, and he was fine too? So, and that got a little laugh. It wasn't a big laugh, right? But it was a little laugh. It started the chuckle muscles going. When she then goes into 11 months, well, she's using the comedic skill of dramatic delivery here. She understands the timing of holding that, building the expectation, and then reversing the expectation, subverting it. And that gets a bigger laugh. Now, of course, we can't live in a parallel universe and test the two things, but I bet the laugh on that second line is bigger when that first gag is there than if that first gag isn't there at all. That joke is laughed at more because there was a joke to begin with. So it's not about how funny the joke is. It's often about how you build the momentum into it as well. If she didn't have that first joke, she wouldn't get as big a laugh necessarily for that second one. And it would seem like that line isn't as funny. Even if the wording was the same, even if the dramatic delivery and the timing was all the same, humor is about building this momentum. So when you're wanting to have this levity in your speech, when you're wanting to connect through that particular emotion, don't do it as a one-off thing. Think about what are some other aspects of humor that I can build in. And they don't need to be this rip-roaring amazing gags. They can be these cute little lines like, and he was fine. That cute little line starts to warm up the speaking, so when you come in with the killer line later on, you're going to get a much bigger response from your audience.
And delivered an electrifying knockout blow to our vows. Boom!
Intensity. Love the intensity and energy of Ramona's gestures. First of all, she's weaving in this boxing metaphor, isn't she? It isn't boom explosion, it's boom punch. This is the thing about energy and intensity. It's not just about high energy equals better. It's about understanding how to channel and utilize that energy. Ramona's a very dynamic and energetic speaker, or certainly this speech is dynamic and energetic. But it's not just like this kind of rah-rah Tony Robbins, like here we go, energy, energy, energy. She understands how to use a base for this energy. When she's using a boxing metaphor, we get this intensity and possibly even violence from this boxing metaphor as well. So when Ramona is delivering this high energy and dynamism, it doesn't feel like it's too much or it's off because she's channeling it through the boxing metaphor. If she was doing this speech and she was talking about, yeah, so one time I got married and then suddenly, boom, it would feel a bit more off and a bit more out of place. But because she's established the boxing metaphor already leading up to this point, it feels more congruent with the rest of the speech. It's not just about high energy for high energy's sake. It's about understanding how that high energy plays in and fits into the rest of what you've done in your speaking. And this, I think, is one of Ramona's strengths in this speech. Is number one, she's able to tap into that high energy. But number two, she's created a context and a foundation for where that high energy fits in and how it best is served at particular points in the speech.
Round 3. Speaking.
So here we're seeing a continuation of that stage anchoring. We had round 1, we had round 2, we had round 3. And what she's done here is, again, just use that little bit of levity, round 3 speaking. And this is a little bit of an in-joke with the audience. Everyone here is in Toastmasters, everyone here is part of the organization because they wanted to improve their speaking. They know the fears, doubts, insecurities, obstacles, challenges that come with this passage of speaking. And that little speaking is just a little bit of a nod to the in-joke and the common experience the audience have. If Ramona was delivering this speech in a completely different context, it would still be a worthwhile speech and it would still connect with the audience. But at that particular point, when she went round 3 speaking, it probably wouldn't have that response if she was talking to a room full of accountants or high school students, rather than people who are part of this public speaking organization. Seeing this awareness of what are the relatable links to your audience and where can you weave in those relatable links. Even if you're doing a speech that you've done before, are there these little opportunities to just sprinkle something in? If Ramona's delivering this speech in a different context, she probably takes out that little, I know I'm going to do an in-joke here and there's going to be a little bit of a laugh. She would just say round 3 speaking, or she might even choose a different round 3, a different life experience to make the point. So you can have a stock speech and you can deliver it in largely the same way on multiple occasions. But where are those little points of customization and adaptability that allow you to link that speech better with the audience you're delivering to on the day?
And taking hit after hit, I was ready to throw in the towel. I was down for the count. 6, 7, 8.
Here we see Ramona really working the metaphor, throwing in the towel, down for the count. She could say this in different ways, couldn't she? She could say, it was tough, I felt like giving up, and I wasn't going to try again. That's what she's saying here, isn't it? But what she's doing is she's communicating that through this power of the metaphor. She's established this boxing metaphor, and she's finding different ways to plug into this metaphor to make her points more memorable, to make them stand out. She's even got the nice little prop, the weapon out of the towel. Full credit to her for we're halfway through this speech right now, and I was thinking, man, she's so lucky that that towel didn't fall out at some random other time. So whatever she did to secure that towel, great job. Having it there to use as that little prop, that visual demonstration, adding that extra flourish, really working. Okay, once you've got a theme for your speech, once you've got a metaphor, squeeze that juice. How much is in there that you can use and utilize in your speech? How can you work in these different ideas that match the theme, make your point stand out, to make common wisdom sound uncommon? What she's saying here is, I felt like giving up and I didn't want to try again. That is common experience. There's nothing unique and special about those particular words. What she's doing to make them unique and special is she's presenting them through this boxing metaphor, presenting old wisdom in a fresh way.
Instead of looking into a mirror of defeat, it became a window possibilities.
Love that line. Brilliant word wizardry. I think one of the things that I really enjoy about speeches, and I think this is my little bit of a bias, being an author as well as a speaker, loving books, loving the working of language. I love to see clever use of language in speeches. And this was a great example. For me, this is actually one of the highlights of the speech. Even though there's a lot of energy and dynamism and impactful moments in the speech, just this little working of language, I think, is so clever. Understanding the link. What we've got here is Ramona is using the link of glass and thinking, okay, how can I have two different meanings on the same object of glass? So you've got the glass of a mirror, and she uses that in terms of this negative self-look. And then she uses the glass of a window for a positive outlook. Negative inlook, positive outlook. A really clever flipping of the dynamic. And she's doing the other things that bring this to life as well. She's got the body language. So we see that mirror in front. We see that window as she paints it. Bringing in the clever language and working out how do you deliver this to make that language really pop on stage. And this is the advantage that speakers have over authors. Authors only ever have that language. The words have got to do the heavy lifting. And in speeches, the words can certainly do all the lifting as well. What makes that great is not Ramona's body language. What makes that great is the essence of the words itself. But then she adds to and supplements the clever use of language with that additional body language on top. So this is one of my favorite moments of speech. I love a little bit of word wizardry. I love the playing with language, and this is a fantastic example from Ramona here.
I got back in the ring. I went back to college. I got my degree, and I graduated magna cum laude. Yeah. After failing 4 times, I was still standing. After my loss at the district level.
You can see here, Ramona returns to her previously established anchors. She sets them up at the beginning of the speech. Round 1, round 2, round 3. And now that those are anchored for the audience, she just has to go back there to take the audience back into that story, back into that experience, back into that emotion. This again is how we execute stage movement correctly. You build anchors for the audience. You go, okay, here are some key stories or some key themes or some key messages that I want the audience to really be staying along with. I want them to be grasping it. I want them to be feeling it. I want them to be understanding it. And anytime you return to those anchors, you're enhancing that audience experience. You're enhancing that audience perception and integration of what you're talking about. So again, we're really just seeing the full narrative circle of this anchoring. That Ramona doesn't just move to some different parts of the stage, tell a different story, and then just forget about it. She brings back that stage movement and she brings back that anchoring as she's starting to tie the speech back together towards the end.
As for my marriage, I'm still in training.
I love this joke, and I love this little facial expression that comes through. The facial expression, it really sells the line. There are many different comedic techniques, and I think there's a comedy in body language, the gestures that you have, the postures, the facial expression, and look how expressive and emotive that is for Ramona. So I love this first setup and build up of the joke. Let's see what happens after this.
I have not yet found Mr. Right, but this is an international convention.
And you see the follow-up joke there as well. Again, this layering of humor. And also the execution of the facial expression. Again, we've got these two jokes here. And again, It's the line, but it's also the delivery of the line as well. Thinking about how you best deliver those individual jokes. I think the facial expressions, they really sell the humor here, but also the layering of the humor. These two lines don't come at random different parts of the speech. They come closer together and they build on each other. They help each other be funnier together rather than if they're delivered alone. That's the synergistic effect of humor. And Ramona's been able to perfectly execute that on a couple of examples of her speech. This speech is not a humorous speech in terms of it's a speech that's designed to be funny. So she's not using humor throughout, not in the same way that maybe someone like Ken Robinson does with his TED Talk. Even some of the other speeches that we've seen at the World Championship of Public Speaking, they've been more humorous throughout and have had more of that humorous slant. This speech isn't a humorous speech, but Ramona is understanding when are the good times to execute that humor, and when she is choosing to use humor, how to get the most heavy lifting out of that humor when it comes into the speech.
I'm still standing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're still standing. Very nice.
There was some accidental interaction there. That was not intended to be a call and response interaction. You can see Ramona is in her element. She's really just getting that final flourish on the end of the speech. And as she does that, the audience suddenly come in and you can see the look of surprise on Ramona's face. This was not a planned interaction. But rather than go, oh wait, I didn't plan this to be an interaction. I need to go back to the way that I've practiced this speech before. I need to get back into my head with that. She embraces that response and embraces that reaction. And this is something that, again, I've said on previous analysis videos that I've done on the channel, is sometimes when this happens, the speakers get spooked and they stamp on that reaction. They go, no, that wasn't part of the planning. That wasn't part of the process. I wanted you to respond here. I didn't want you to respond here. So because you responded here, I'm not going to reciprocate that response. Ramona doesn't panic. She doesn't do that, which is especially courageous given how tight the timing is at the World Championship of Public Speaking. At 7 minutes 31, you're disqualified. And most speeches are floating around that 7 to 7:10. Anytime you get something unexpected back from the audience, it's really eating into that small window of error you've got. And it can be nervy and it can be panicky when that happens. Ramona's near the end of her speech. She knows that the clock is ticking on that last little window, but she doesn't panic. She knows she's there to respond to the audience and she allows that response to come in. It's a really good sign of adaptability and being in the moment with her speech. And I think she really emulated that right from that first point of coming up onto stage and just laughing, just going, yeah, this is good. I'm going to have fun. I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to be here in the moment. And right here at the end of her speech, she's still in the moment. She's still enjoying it. She's still embodying it. She's still embracing it. Great to see for Ramona that she can stay in the moment and have fun making the most of this opportunity at the very highest level of this contest. Do you feel that you are on the canvas with your speaking? You've been trying and trying and trying again, and it just seems that you can't get your speeches and you can't get your speaking where you want them to be. Well, that's where a speaking coach might help you. If you were to hire me as a speaking coach, we would look at your speeches in the same way that we're doing with Ramona's speech here today. First of all, looking at, well, what is good about your speaking? What are the areas that you've really grasped? What are the things that make you stand out? Looking at Ramona's speech, for example, we can see that some of her strengths are her energy, her stage movement, some of her expressiveness through her body language. We'll go, okay, fantastic. Here are some strengths. How do we maximize those strengths in a speech? You have strengths in your speaking as well, even if it doesn't necessarily feel like it at this moment. What we then also do is look at, okay, well, what are the areas that you need to sharpen up and polish? How do we bring some of that refinement? How do we bring some of that strategy and skill into other areas of speaking to complement and enhance what you're doing well already? If you feel like your speeches need an extra little bit of training, then I have a couple of different coaching options that are available for you. Easiest way to find out about this is if you go to my LinkedIn, there's a link in the video description below. Send me a message on LinkedIn, outline a little bit of what you're working on with your speaking, where you want to take your speaking, what are some challenges that you're encountering. We can look at some different coaching options and see if there's an option that works for you. What we're going to do now is going to go and look at how could Ramona improve her speech. Now bear in mind, this won the World Championship of Public Speaking. It's a great speech already, but great speeches always have that room and opportunity for improvement. When I'm looking at Toastmasters speeches, I analyze them in a slightly different way to how I do with my analysis videos elsewhere on the channel. Elsewhere on the channel, you'll see me analyzing US presidents, some of the big famous TED Talks by these visionary, revolutionary leaders, huge public figures that have experience of that exposure and visibility. Here in Toastmasters, we're just a public speaking organization that everyday ordinary people go along to. And I'm always mindful and respectful of that when I'm analyzing other Toastmasters speeches. So I don't want to lay in heavy and thick and nitpick on every single little thing. I always want to do these analyses in a helpful and approachable manner. So that's the first thinking when it comes to analyzing these speeches. The second thinking is that by the time the speakers have got to this World Championship of Public Speaking, they have worked endlessly on these speeches. They have worked for months, maybe even years. And after you've worked that amount of time on a speech and you've delivered that much, you can get a little bit sick of it, to be honest, or you at least need to take a break from it for a while. So again, hearing endlessly about a speech that you've already heard endlessly about, that you've already acquired a huge amount of feedback and support and coaching on, can sometimes be a little bit tedious. So again, just like to take a softer, lighter touch for that reason. And thirdly, the most important reason I would say is this already won the World Championship of Public Speaking. It's already a great speech. I'm watching these speeches as a fan of the World Championship of Public Speaking, as someone who enters these, as someone who looks up to the people who get to this final stage, looks up at what they've been able to do, the work that they've put in, the speech that they've been able to craft. And that's always the mentality that I'm looking at these speeches with. I'm looking at them as a fan, as a member of the same organization, as ultimately a fellow competitor as well. So again, I don't feel like I can break apart someone's speech endlessly when they have managed to get to this high level of the competition. And it's a level that I haven't been to yet. So with all this in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to evaluate this how I would do in a normal Toastmasters meeting. If I'm doing a 3-minute Toastmasters evaluation of a speech, I'll look at one aspect of content, what the speaker said, and one aspect of delivery, how they said it. And that's what I'm going to do with this speech as well. So I'm going to pull together a couple of different things that I've noticed and give what I think are the 2 most helpful suggestions on what Ramona said and how she said it, and how she could have improved the speech. And if she ever wants to draw upon this speech again, work it into a different environment, deliver it to a different audience, how that might help her to improve this speech going forward. And ultimately, how can we learn as speakers and fellow fans that can help us to improve and go forward with our speeches? Let's take a look at them.
Was it your family? Your friends? Or did you hold on to your faith?
So take a note of that. We have a counting 1-2 gesture and then a prayer gesture. I'm just going to show you another one shortly after this, and this will help me to explain this point that I noticed.
Maybe you've never been knocked down, but you've seen one of your family members take a devastating blow.
Devastating blow. These 2 examples I wanted to pick out. One of the things that I talked about in terms of a strength of Ramona's speech, I said she's got this great energy, she's got these really impactful and expressive gestures, she's got the movement around the stage, she's got her facial expressions. So much of her non-verbals is really enhancing and bringing this speech out. There was just these couple of examples here where the body language, it didn't quite fit and it didn't quite make sense for me. The first example I pointed to, she goes, 1, 2, and what would you expect to see after that? You'd expect to see a 3, wouldn't you? So she starts this counting gesture, but then she switches to a prayer gesture. So it goes 1, 2, prayer. There's a bit of a disconnect between those two things that she was doing. In the second example here, she says devastating blow, singular. She goes devastating blow, 2 punches. So she said 1 blow, but she's acted out 2. So these were just small inconsistencies that it just took away and mismatched her words a little bit, which I thought was such a shame because so much of her other gestures and her other body language really added to and enhanced. And there was just these couple moments here where that didn't ring true for me. So this does feel slightly nitpicky, but ultimately we're aiming for perfection, aren't we? So when Ramona has demonstrated this great ability for her gestures to add to and enhance her words elsewhere in the speech, I would have just liked to have seen them do the same thing here. So either she perseveres with the counting gesture to begin with, just say 1, 2, 3, and just do prayer as the third thing. We know what prayer is, don't we? So just keep that gesture consistent and then have a devastating blow, just the 1, because then that feels like a knockout punch. It's so strong, it only takes 1 punch. If it takes 2 punches, it makes it feel half as intense, doesn't it? So just a little bit of tidying up and consistency of the gestures would be my first suggestion for delivery.
My challenge to you is to stay in the ring, whether you're a fighter or a coach. If you're on the side of the ring.
Something I noticed in this speech was 2 messages seemed to come out, and you heard that message here. Again, you'll have to go and watch the full speech because I haven't talked about it elsewhere in this analysis, and that's what I always recommend that you do. I always put the link to the full speech in the video description so you can go and watch the speech in its entirety, get the context understanding for what I'm evaluating here. At about 3 minutes 30-ish, about halfway through, Ramona talks about helping people up. And there's almost this call to who is helping you up, or who are you helping up off the canvas? And there starts to be this push and direction towards the idea of helping other people, that kind of coach and mentor aspect. And that's a great message to think about, okay, well, how can we help people who are on the canvas, who have been through the proverbial 12 rounds of Mike Tyson? You know, you can really work the boxing metaphor here. And then here we get this message of how can you get off the canvas? How can you keep fighting? So now we're hearing this message. It's almost like, well, actually the key message is for you to keep going, is for you to persevere, is to find that inner strength to pull yourself forward. And then we get this little part about being a fighter or a coach. And it kind of starts to straddle these 2 messages. Messaging is one of the key parts of any speech. It's actually especially key when it comes to the World Championship of Public Speaking. Basically, the criteria you're getting measured on is telling a compelling story that has a clear message. A lot of the rest of the stuff is just window dressing after that. And I think there was just this little branching of the message in this speech. And I would say to Ramona, just put your camp in one or the other. Both are great messages. If you want to talk about the power of having a mentor and being a mentor, in her speech, she didn't really mention anyone who helped her get off the canvas. So I think she would have to work in who is that supportive voice for her? How did she pay that forward to someone else? That I think would require more changing of the content of the speech. And that's why I would lean towards the other. This speech, to me, it felt like pulling yourself off the canvas, about having that inner resilience, that toughness, pushing through the adversities. That was the message that came home for me. And that I think was just, Ramona can stamp her flag harder in that. Yes, coaching and mentoring is important, but you've got to choose your lane with the messaging here. And I think we just got a little bit of a deviation of pull yourself off the canvas and maybe a coach can help too. Pull yourself off the canvas and maybe help someone as well. So it wasn't that the message became unclear and foggy in this speech. I still took home the message of pull yourself up off the canvas. But looking at this with a more critical, analytical eye, there now seems to be this sort of asterisk of pull yourself off the canvas and maybe get a coach and be a coach at the same time. It's not that the speech doesn't make sense and doesn't have an impactful message now. I think just that message can be streamlined a little stronger. So 7.5-minute speech, you don't have a lot of time to get across a key idea. And I think Ramona has got across that key idea so well by building up this theme, by working that boxing metaphor. So she's really leaning into how she makes this message pop. And I think that final message that is popping out is pulling yourself off the canvas and going another round. And just lean into that message even more than what she's doing already. I love this speech. It's one of my favorite speeches. I've got a little bit of that personal connection in terms of when I first started competing. But again, it's a case study that I use so much with clients, particularly the stage movement aspect. The way that Ramona does it is it's so clear, it's so intentional, it's so purposeful. That I would say is a real strength of the speech. She's got amazing expressiveness through her gestures and her expressions as well. High energy, high intensity. This is one of the classic speeches for me. And after watching this analysis video and breaking apart how she's done it, I'm sure you'll see it as a classic as well.